Okay, hello and welcome back again. We start right where we ended. We still talk about the possibility of syntactic a priori knowledge. We are still at part 1 where we are trying to give technical definitions. I advise you to watch my last video if you didn't already, where we explicated what we mean by knowledge. Just a quick recap. The concept of knowledge. Now indicate concepts from now on by writing them in uppercase. Implied a host of other concepts, for example, belief. And with the concept of belief, that implied the concept of proposition, that thing that is believed. We also arrived at justification. We arrived at truth. We arrived at rational being. Knower. Also, we could call it the knower. Or just a human being. Yeah, this is like the conceptual analysis we did in the previous video. Okay. So, now we have to define what a proposition is. This is the way it goes, I think. So 1.2 proposition explication. Before I talk about what a proposition is, I would give you like a pragmatic prime on it, so to say, and I mean pragmatic in the sense of philosophy of language. Okay. Imagine a discursive setting. You and your friend are talking about who will win the election. In whatever country you are, it doesn't matter. Your friend says, let's call in this fictitious world President A. Thomas. Okay, I like the name Thomas more. Thomas will never be our president. He just isn't that popular with the folk who actually vote. You reply, I don't believe this to be true. In the latest polls, he had a very favorable rating, let's say. Okay, this is like a random discussion people had for many times, I think. And now I want to introduce you to the concept of a proposition by abstracting away from this very concrete example. It's a very concrete example. And now we abstract away. In a discursive setting, there are at least two rational beings who utter sentences that convey some sort of information to the other discursive, I just call them party, to the other party. This is a part of what a discursive setting is, and these persons, I call them persons as I said, are playing a game. We could call giving reasons. Yeah. They try to give each other reasons to believe this or the other. They try to convince. Okay? And here you can see something very interesting, and that happens a lot in philosophy. The most like concrete, trivial examples, when you abstract away from them, always show you like a very beautiful rational substructure of our practices. Practices, I don't know if that's the plural from practice, but I imagine it to be. Okay. Now we can talk about what a proposition is finally. I think this makes it way clearer. Proposition P is just that information I talked about previously. So we said a discussion second, there are two rational beings who utter sentences that convey some sort of information. And this part here is the interesting part, okay? We call this semantic information because the information is encoded, so to say, in natural language. German, for example. So a proposition P is the content of the utterings of discursive parties, you could say. This is one way of putting it. And the concept of information and content, of course, content is a metaphoric way of putting it. There are actually very precise definition of what like meaning is in formal semantics, but we won't get into that because this is a whole nother series. I talked about meaning. This is semantic information, content we could call meaning. Okay, the meaning of a sentence. We talk about the meaning of a sentence, the meaning of a sentence is what we call a proposition. Okay, this is one way of talking about it. But the first concept that we need in order to explicate what a proposition is the concept of a sentence. And the sentence, we have a formal definition of what a sentence is. Yeah, and this is a very good thing because formal definitions are rigorous and precise. A sentence is simply a well-formed formula, you could say, of elements in a given natural language. Let us only talk about natural language. Okay, this may sound a little bit weird, but well-formed is a syntactic notion. Okay, it's with the syntax. For example, I can say in English, no, the weather is good. Right? It's I know the weather is good. Meaning the nouns and the verbs and the adjectives and simply the way a sentence in English or any other natural language like German, there are syntactic rules that define what actually a sentence is, and you can define this. Like, and this is actually the work of Noam Chomsky. Okay, he gave a very nice way of representing the syntactic structure of sentences. So you can see this is a very formal, almost like a mathematics field of inquiry when we define what a sentence is. This is what we call formal linguistics. But for now, just think about a sentence as containing words of a natural language, so some simple elements that get like structured by syntactic rules. Yeah. In the most general sense, a concrete example is a trivial thing to give because, for example, the snow is white is a sentence. Okay, this is a grammatically correctly formed sentence. In that sense, it is well formed. It respects the rules of syntax of the English language. We write them sentences for here in these double quotes, as for example in programming we do. but this sentence has a meaning. The meaning of a sentence, okay? Because we distinguish between syntax and semantics in linguistics, and this is a very important distinction, because the concept of meaning has nothing to do with the syntax, okay? Okay, yeah, let's just believe that to be true. Of course, these are very controversial topics. The meaning of a sentence, the snow is white, simply is, we could say, is the proposition P that the snow is white. This follows what the logical positivists would call a disquotation schema. This is a little bit like talking in a meta language about another language, but I won't get into that. But the idea is not, this is not like an informative sentence. This is just to explicate what a proposition is, okay? This sentence has a certain meaning. And when I say this sentence has a meaning, we all have an intuitive notion of what I mean. The sentence has a content, it conveys some semantic information. If you imagine it in a discursive setting where a party A says the snow is white to person B, you know what it feels like, so to say, to be person B in understanding what the sentence means. Yeah, you understand the sentence if you are capable of understanding the English language, right? And this content, the semantic information, this meaning of the sentence, this is what we call a proposition. Okay. Yeah, this is how I would define it. Okay, maybe let's rewind a little bit and give an exact definition as above. The proposition P, I call it expressed by the sentence S, is, and this is where we are defining, the semantic content information, of S. You could say that. Content information, we also talked about meaning. As I said, this is not a very precise definition, but and definition is not a end in itself, it's there to help the understanding. And I think after we define this proposition, we can actually start to talk about our main question about the possibility of synthetic a priori knowledge of S. Right? We can also, I think it's very useful to think about what a proposition is in a discursive setting, because it's just what we the content of our utterings. Yeah. So imagine party R says the average American is 5'9" inches tall. It's clear what the by saying this in a discursive setting or any other setting at all. As I said, this is the field of pragmatics. So if we consider the discursive settings, we are thinking about it in a pragmatic way. And pragmatic means not as we use the term in everyday language, but as a field of linguistics. The proposition is simply that which party A conveys by saying the average American is 5'9" inches tall. Clearly, by uttering a sentence of this type, you are conveying information, and this information, this content, this meaning, this is what a proposition is. Okay, propositions, and by this I will end this part of the series. We find propositions everywhere. It's very interesting. The concept of proposition is, in a way, just like a technical definition, and in that sense a tool, but the tool in itself is it's a very interesting thing, because we, for example, believe that P. This is why we needed to explicate the notion of proposition in the first place, because we talked about knowledge, and then we realized that the notion of belief is implicated in that concept of knowledge, right? We believe that P, we know that P, we are justified in believing that P, whatever you want to say. So this P is somehow, it's a semantic notion. This should be clear from our explication above, but it's also, by that, it is also implicated in the philosophy of mind. Because when we talk about beliefs, in general, if we talk about information that is encoded in a natural language, that has a, we could say, semantic encoding, then of course this information lives in our heads. Okay, so the proposition is a real thing, and it's weird because it doesn't seem like a real thing, because it's such an abstract notion, but you have 1,000 beliefs, thousands over thousands of beliefs, right? You may believe, for example, that it's like dark outside now, huh? And this information, this belief, is encoded in a semantic way. This is at least what we believe after linguistic turn. But even if you don't believe that, what I'm just doing is uttering sentences which convey information, and hopefully you understand, right? So this is a very interesting notion, this notion of proposition, because it's implicated in epistemology, in the philosophy of mind, and in the philosophy of language, almost everywhere. So this is just a very rough primer that I gave you right here. But you have to do this in philosophy because we have to explicate our terms, right? But we also have to cut it short many times because we want to talk about this, yeah? And not about knowledge, beliefs, propositions, etc. pp. But I just want to demonstrate you how a philosophical analysis is actually done, if you know what you're doing. Yeah, so let's recap. We had a definition of explication of knowledge. Then we ventured to give explication of the concept of a proposition. We defined that here. But as you already know from the lesson, we have a problem with the word definition, because I don't think that's how reasoning is functioning. But okay, yeah. And in the next video, we'll have to talk about a distinction in the class of propositions, namely the distinction between a priori and a posteriori propositions, and of synthetic and analytic propositions. So yeah, see you then. Bye bye.